Okay, good morning. So we're starting a new siman today, siman Shin Chof Aleph, and this is entitled Dinei Toilesh B'Shabbos, V'din Teichen, V'dinei Tikunei Meichel, Ma'abed, V'la, Shabo Yutes Seifim. So it's a very practical, relevant halachas, Teichen, Ma'abed, Losh, all the sort of food preparation on Shabbos. Okay, let's go. Says the Mechaber, Sif Aleph, Chavilei Pia, Azov v'Kaironis. So, which Rashi says a mini Azov. They're all different types of herbs. So the first one, Pia, is like a wild hyssop. Azov is hyssop. Kaironis is thyme, which is also all different types. It says Pirish mini Azov, different types of herbs. Hichnisim le'etzim. Now you bring them into your house for one of two reasons. Either you bring them in for firewood, le'etzim, for kindling. Ein mistapkin mehen. Now they're muktzah, so therefore you can't use them for other things on Shabbos. However, ichnisin l'meichel behema. But if you bring them in for animal food, kaitim va'eichel biyad, then you can eat them for yourself. You can eat them by hand. Avaloi b'kli, but not with a kli. Or meila b'rashiyetz ba'esov, and you can roll them with the tops of your fingers. So let's see the Mishnah Berurah. Sif Kotan Aleph Pirish min Asef. Tzorich leima minne asovim heim. In other words, all of the above. Peya, Azov, Koronis, they're all different types of herbs, of grasses. And these things, this fodder, could be used for burning, for kindling, or it could be used for Meichel Behema. Everything depends on your intention for these things. If you use it for kindling, liyapshon, so you want to dry them out, and you bring it in stoma. Let's say you haven't designated the purpose, the function of it. The default is that you're going to use it for Meichel Behema. Mehen. So this is going on. Ein yes. So if it's le'etzim, then ein mistapkin mehen. Says Mishnah Berurah Sif Kotan Gimel, the makza daite minayhu v'havelo muktzah, because I'm using it for firewood. So if I bring these herbs, these woods, into your house, and I was planning on using it for eitzim as firewood, so then they become muktzah. But if I was going to use it for Meichel Behema, then kaitim va'eichel. Why? Because they can also be used to some degree for Meichel Odom, and therefore I'm allowed to eat it. But I need to do some sort of shinui. I can't use a kli like I would do during the week. I use my hands. If I've got stalks with seeds inside them, I can rub them with the tops of my fingers in order to open them up, and then I can extract the seed. Not with the whole hand. So during the week I would take this stuff and I would roll them like that. That's all the dechol. If I do it just with the tops of my fingers, that's a shinu, and that would be allowed. Okay, Seif base. Ein oisin mei melach harbe biyachad. You're not allowed to make a large quantity of salt water, for pickling uses, or mishum dedomi leibud, because that looks a bit like the tanning process. When you would have leather and you have hides and you would tan it, and you would make a lot of salt water and that sort of thing. That looks like ibud, of the part of the tanning process. So therefore, you can't, even if your intention is not for tanning but it's for pickling, then you can't do that. But this dafka mei melech harbeb is not allowed. But if you want to make a small quantity of salt water to put into a tavshil, to put into as part of the cooking process, that would be okay. But if you make a really strong concentrated salt water, where you've got 2/3 salt and 1/3 water, that's not allowed. Even a small amount, and that always features Seder nights. If you haven't prepared the salt water beforehand, you've got to be just mindful of that. You can't make a very strong concentrated salt water mixture on Shabbos. Okay, mei melach v'uadin im noisen yain v'chometz or sham mashkin b'melach, and so too lav dafka it's melach into water. But even if you put it, if you put the salt into wine or into vinegar, or sham mashkin b'melach, that again, if you do it in large quantities, it looks like ibud, and therefore it's not allowed. Hakvosim, kvoshim, says the Mishnah Berurah Sif Kotan Tes. What is that? Yerek, it's a vegetable. Shekoivshin oisei kedei lehiskayim. that you want to preserve it. So you want to take your cucumbers and put them into this saltwater mixture, and then that will become pickles and it will keep it for a long time. And because if your cucumbers you just leave alone, after several days they'll wither and become bad. But if you preserve it, then the pickled cucumbers can last for a long time. Because once you've created this liquid, which is going to preserve the food, then it looks like ibud ha'ar, where you're doing it to process and to tan the leather. She'hamelach mekayme, because that's what happens. That's what the melach does. It preserves the hide. V'afal gav dekaymelon ein ibud ba'achlim midaraisa. Even though we say there isn't a concern of ibud, it's only for but it's for leather, but it's not for food. Min haTorah at least, mikol mokum midrabanan mi'asa. But Chazal say that applying salt water for foods is an issa drabon, commercial kosovo poiskim. For kosovo b'sefer tosefes Shabbos, dafke im kavnos l'sis l'toicha kvoshim. The issa is specifically where you're going to put the mei melach into the kvoshim. Aval im ein kavnos l'zeh, dahainu shedaitze l'chalkom l'toicha tafshilin. You're not doing it for pickling. You're just doing it to flavor your food. Afilu harbe muta, even lots of this salt water in your food would be allowed. Aval Eli Rabbi oiseh. But the Eli Rabbi says, no, even if your intention is to do it for tafshilin, for food purposes, not for pickling, it would still, in large quantities, it would be asa. V'chein mashma b'meiri shekosov darak b'm'at hitiru. That also the Meiri says that only small quantities of salt water for food cooking would be allowed. That you're doing it for now and not for sort of a longer term preservation. Because if you're doing large quantities of mei melach, then it looks like you're doing it l'tzorech chol, and that's got to be avoided. Okay, so therefore, machlekes regarding large quantities for tafshil, for preserving, for kibush, and for preserving, then it's for sure not allowed. But for tafshil, there's a machlekes about large quantities, but everyone would agree that small quantities would be okay. Mishum dedomi le'ibud. So the whole concern of not making salt water on Shabbos is domi le'ibud. Of taking mei melach harbe and putting foods into it, taking your cucumbers and putting it into the mei melach is kibush. You're not doing anything wrong. What's the problem? So it's doime le'ibud. It looks like you're doing part of the tanning process on Shabbos. Says Mishnah Berurah Sif Cotton Yud. Va'afilim loisin shemen l'toich mei hamelach lahatim. Even if you put oil into the salt water, which clearly shows that you're not doing it sort of for preservation, it's really just lahatim, it's to give it a taste. Gam kein also, still that would be caught by this. If you mix the water and the oil together and then you put the salt in, there are those who are makel if you change the order and you put the oil and water in first and then you put the salt in. Or you put the salt, or you put the salt in first, and then you add the water. The problem is when you've got water and you add the salt to it, that looks like ibud. That's the problem. Because by putting the oil in, that weakens the potency of the salt. Melios az from being very strong. And therefore that hasn't got the same status as mei melach, and therefore you're okay. And that which they say, well, if you've got mei melach and then you put oil in afterwards, because at the end of the day, when you put the mayim melach, you've got the mixture of mayim melach, then it looks like you're doing ibud, you're doing tanning. Okay. Then the Mechaber carried on and said, but you want to put a bit of salt and water to put into your, as part of your cooking, that would be okay. Or if you want to do it to dip your bread into a mixture of salty water. If you want to pour some salty sort of brine into some chicken or some fish, roasted chicken and roasted fish, or whether it's for this meal or for another purpose, that would be okay. But you can't do it for beyond Shabbos. Okay, Yud Beis, just to finish off. So we said to put a very strong, concentrated salt water mixture is not allowed. That means 2/3 salt and 1/3 water. Also, lasis menu afilu ma'at. Says the Mishnah Berurah, because that looks like you're making some sort of brine to pickle fish. That's how you would do it. You're allowed to add vinegar to murias, to this brine, once the food has dried out. Okay, Beseda. All right, probably a good place to stop. Okay.